Welcome to the channel. Subscribe and support, so we can bring you epic sci-fi and HFY stories every week. The emergency session of the Galactic Unity Council convened in the crystalline chambers of Nexus Prime. Representatives from 12 major civilizations, arranged in perfect symmetry around the central dais. Ambassador Dekvar, of the hegemony, raised his scaled hand, voice echoing through the translators. The Yalara stand, accused of harboring forbidden AI consciousness matrices, a violation of the Sentience Prohibition Act. The pale, ethereal Yalara delegation huddled together, their luminescent skin flickering with distress patterns. Elder Nayat H stepped forward, her voice like wind chimes. "We are healers, philosophers. We know nothing of these ... weapons. But the evidence hologram showed their research stations, their quantum experiments, their attempts to understand consciousness itself." Commander Jalen Voss, Earth's representative, shot to his feet. "This is madness. The Yalara have been our allies for 60 years. They've never shown aggression, never threatened." The Council's judgment fell like a hammer. Exile to the Void Territories, immediate termination of citizenship, assets forfeit. No appeal, no mercy. The first wave of Yalara refugee ships launched from their homeworld under the cover of artificial night, their crystalline hulls reflecting the last light they'd ever see from their dying star. Captain Mira Solis watched from the bridge of the Defiance, her knuckles white on the command console as the tracking display lit up with red markers. Council enforcement drones, converging like vultures. "Ma'am, they're not even waiting for the ships to clear the system," her tactical officer whispered. The slaughter was methodical. Civilian transports, medical vessels, even ships full of children. The drones made no distinction. Half the Yalara fleet died in those first brutal hours, their emergency transmissions cutting to static one by one. The survivors, battered and bleeding, managed to reach the Outer Rim's desolate moon of Iriath-9, crash-landing in the frozen wastes as their ship's life support systems failed. Back on Earth, the encrypted distress calls reached the UN Space Command at 0347 hours. Secretary General Chen stared at the transmission logs, his face grave. Council law is clear. Aid to exiled species is an act of war. But in the back of the chamber, Captain Solis was already moving, already calculating flight paths and supply manifests. She'd served in 3 border wars, saved colonies from raiders and plague, but this felt different. This felt like a test of who humanity really was. 3 days later, the human fleet descended through Iriath-9's thin atmosphere, like angels of defiance. Mira's strike team found the Yalara survivors in improvised shelters made from wreckage, their children shivering in the -40 cold. Adults succumbing to alien pathogens their immune systems couldn't fight. The camps stretched for kilometers, 40,000 souls clinging to life by threads. Dr. Sarah Kim, the fleet's chief medical officer, worked without sleep for 18 hours straight, her hands steady as she adapted human medical technology to alien physiology. "We need more antivirals, more thermal units," she called out, sweat freezing on her brow, despite the medical tent's heaters. Captain Solis moved between the camps like a force of nature, coordinating supply drops, establishing communications, setting up the infrastructure of hope. When the first Yalara child smiled at her, a tiny creature with opalescent skin and eyes, like captured starlight, Mira felt something settled in her chest. This was right. This was human. The threats came within hours. The hegemony's war voice boomed across all frequencies. "Withdraw immediately, or face annihilation. You have 72 hours. Other council species added their ultimatum: straight sanctions, military action, complete isolation. But the human volunteers kept working. Engineers repurposed crashed ships into prefabricated housing. Farmers coaxed food from Iriath-9's mineral-rich soil, using hydroponic systems jury-rigged from life support components. Teachers set up schools in cargo containers. Human children and Yalara younglings, learning together despite the language barrier. When the galactic news networks demanded a statement, Mira stood before the cameras with Iriath-9's desolate landscape behind her, her voice carrying across 100 worlds. "You asked us to abandon them because they weren't like you, but we refuse. We don't leave people behind out because they're human, but because they're people. If that makes us criminals in your eyes, then we'll be the best criminals the galaxy's ever seen." Elder Nayat H found Captain Solis 3 weeks later, standing watch on the observation deck of the converted orbital station humanity had built from salvaged Yalara ships. "Why do this for us?" the old alien asked, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with curiosity. "Your species gains nothing, risks everything. Mira turned from the viewport where Iriath-9 rotated slowly below, its surface now dotted with light settlements, schools, hospitals, hope made manifest. Because we remember, she said quietly. We remember what it felt like to be alone in the dark, looking up at stars we thought we'd never reach. We remember being told we weren't good enough, weren't civilized enough, weren't worthy of the galaxy's attention. And we promised ourselves never again. Not to us. Not to anyone. The reinforcements came not from official channels, but from the heart of human space merchant captains who'd heard the story. Veteran soldiers who'd served with Yalara medics. Even former council officers whose consciences couldn't bear the silence. They called themselves the Free Earth Armada. A motley collection of retrofitted cargo haulers and decommissioned military vessels held together by determination and spite. Admiral Santos, a 70-year-old veteran of the Centauri Wars, took command of the growing fleet. They want to see what humans do when pushed to the wall, he growled, studying tactical displays. Let's show them. The council fleet arrived on scheduled 36 dreadnoughts, bearing the insignias of 5 major civilizations, their weapons charged and targeting solutions locked. But as they descended toward Iriath-9, space around them erupted with defensive fire. Human engineers had spent weeks turning asteroid debris into kinetic kill vehicles, mining fields into maze-like defensive networks, even rigging the moon's mineral deposits as improvised EMP weapons. The battle lasted 14 hours. Human pilots outnumbered 3-1, used every dirty trick in the book, ramming attacks, boarding actions, turning the enemy's size against them in the asteroid fields. Yalara volunteers operated communications arrays, coordinated medical evacuations, even flew support drones with steady hands, despite never having seen combat before. When the smoke cleared, Iriath-9 still spun in its orbit, its surface scarred but unbroken. 13 council ships drifted as wreckage, their crews rescued by the same humans who'd been shooting at them hours before. The remaining fleet withdrew in what military historians would later call tactical repositioning, but which everyone else recognized as retreat. In the aftermath, as human medics treated wounded enemies alongside their own forces, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The primitive Firuzers had just humiliated the most powerful military alliance in known space, not through superior technology, but through the simple refusal to abandon those who needed help. The political earthquake that followed reshaped interstellar relations overnight. Earth was declared a rogue state, its trade agreements voided, its colonies technically illegitimate. But within days, envoys from the frontier worlds, the independent systems, even breakaway factions from council species, began arriving at Iriath-9. They came quietly, unofficially, bearing gifts of supplies and technology, and something more valuable, recognition. We thought you were weak, whispered Ambassador Veltar, of the Rim Coalition, her insectoid features unreadable, but her tone carrying profound respect. We thought compassion was humanity's great flaw. Now we understand it's your greatest strength. 6 months later, Captain Mira Solis walked through New Haven, the city that had grown from the wreckage of the first refugee camps. Yalara children played in parks built on former landing pads, their laughter mixing with human voices in a dozen languages. The settlement had become something unprecedented, a truly integrated community where 2 species lived not as conquerors and conquered, but as neighbors. The old divisions, the ancient prejudices that had driven the Yalara into exile, seemed absurd here, where human doctors worked alongside Yalara healers, where mixed crews flew cargo runs to the outer colonies, where children of both species attended integrated schools and grew up thinking that diversity was normal, natural, right. Standing on the observation deck of the Meridian Tower built from salvaged Yalara crystal tech and human engineering, Mira watched the sunset paint Iriath-9's sky in shades of purple and gold. Behind her, the command center hummed with quiet efficiency as humans and Yalara worked side by side, managing trade routes, coordinating with other refugee settlements, planning the future of a world that had been written off as uninhabitable. Elder Nyot H joined her at the viewport, her elderly form still graceful despite the trials of the past year. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Your species has sacrificed so much. Mira smiled, her reflection ghost-like in the crystal window. You know what the council never understood? They thought we came here out of pity, or politics, or some primitive tribal loyalty. But that's not what drove us. She turned to face the Yalara elder, her eyes bright with conviction. We came because we looked at you and saw ourselves. Not the physical form, not the technology or the culture. We saw the capacity for hope, for growth, for something better. We saw people worth saving, worth fighting for, worth dying alongside, if necessary. The old aliens, bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Mira had learned was profound gratitude, mixed with something like awe. And now, Nayat H. asked. Now we build something new, Mira replied, gesturing to the city below, where two species had chosen to share a world, rather than divide it. The council wanted to erase you from existence, write you out of history, like you never mattered. Instead, you're helping us write a new chapter one, where being different isn't a crime, where needing help isn't weakness, where standing together makes us all stronger. As night fell over Iriathanine, the lights of New Haven spread across the landscape like a constellation of hope. In the distance, construction crews worked under floodlights, building the new university where human and Yalara researchers would collaborate on projects the council had declared impossible. Ships moved through the orbital traffic lanes, carrying news of the settlement to other worlds, other species who had begun to whisper that maybe, just maybe, there was an alternative to the council's cold order. Captain Mira Solis remained at her post, watching over the world they had all chosen to defend. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: council agents seeking to destabilize the colony, resource shortages, the constant struggle of building a sustainable society from scratch. But tonight, as she watched Yalara children chase fireflies through gardens planted by human hands, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had been denied a place in the galaxy's vision of itself. Humanity had refused to let them face that darkness alone. And in that refusal, in that stubborn insistence that everyone deserved dignity and hope, they had planted the seeds of something that would outlast empires. Something that would remind the stars themselves what it truly meant to be civilized. The galaxy had tried to erase them. Instead, they had rewritten the rules of what was possible when different species chose compassion over conquest, cooperation over domination, hope over fear. And that, Mira thought, as she finally headed home through streets where two worlds had become one, was the most human thing of all. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and support us so we can post new videos every day. Your support means the world.